Hello and welcome back to live coverage of the Apex Gaming $5,000 Modern Open here at Apex Con in sunny Caldwell, Ohio. I'm Todd Tandy Anderson, joined by Ross Merriam. Say hi, Ross.
Hi, Ross.
We got 2 rounds down, 5 more Swiss in the top 8 to bring you all this whole day. Round number 3, Ross, why don't you give us a rundown of who we're going to be watching and what decks they'll be playing?
So, we've got a couple 2-0s in the feature match area. It's going to be Josh Moscow against John Custer. Moscow's playing Breach, Custer playing one of the more popular non-Breach decks in the current metagame in Eldrazi Ramp. However, Moscow's list seems to be prepared for this matchup. He has 2 copies of Into the Floodmaw in the main deck.
Okay.
Very good way to bounce Karn and set up a combo.
Are those kind of replacing the traditional Unholy Heats?
Yeah, 0 Unholy Heat in the entire 75. Does have the 1 Lightning Bolt. So if Karn ticks down, you can bolt it, but you can always bounce it with Into the Floodmaw. Also, interestingly, has 1 copy of Savine's Reclamation. It's a card that really helps you gain access to Underworld Breach from the graveyard should you mill it with something like an Emery or even a Grinding Station. Doesn't have any white producing lands. This is a card that is being splashed entirely off of Mox Opal, and is there any way to make a treasure somewhere?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think
but
it's just
usually
Mox Opal.
Yeah, I mean, Savine's Reclamation is a really powerful card, right? This is something that allows you to essentially win the game without drawing a card from hand, right? Sometimes Underworld Breach is the card you need to draw to kill your opponent, but with Reclamation, you can just mill, pay from the graveyard and kill you.
Exactly. So makes the deck a little bit more consistent so long as you have a Mox Opal draw. The other interesting dynamic from Moscow's side is only main decking 1 win condition. Has a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries in the main and Grapeshot in the sideboard. So if Custer is able to land a quick Karn and find Tormod script, that could prove tricky to answer and could also snipe that Jace with a Kozilek's command if it gets milled early on.
Yeah. All right, well, the players are ready to go in the feature match area. So without further ado, let's head on down for round number 3. On your right, that's going to be John Custer on Eldrazi Ramp. On your left, that's Josh Moscow on Underworld Breach. And we are underway. Stomping ground in the land for John Custer to begin. Not an impressive start. Usually like to start with the 2-mana lands or Utopia Sprawl, but we'll see what he can do on the next couple turns. Moscow leads with Tamio, Mishra's Bauble, and says go.
So with the Bauble, Tamio could transform next turn.
Yeah, without even doing anything. Just Bauble attack, pop clue, draw for turn.
Okay. Solid turn 2 for Custer with Eldrazi Temple into Malevolent Rumble, effectively ramping twice here on the second turn and setting himself up to have at least 4 mana on turn 3, potentially 5 or 6 if he has another 2-mana land.
One of our Once Upon a Galaxy tokens, finding there off of the Malevolent Rumble. We're going to get a Sowing Mycospawn, 3 lands go to the graveyard. Notably, the Sanctum of Ugin going to the graveyard, so if the game gets a little attrition-y later, might not have access to that land. Moscow back to turn 2, doesn't pop the Bauble, maybe needs the Bauble in play to reduce the cost of Emery.
I think he has a Mox Opal in hand, so the Mishra's Bauble playing its part to enable Metalcraft.
Okay, and now it's online thanks to that clue. Here we go. Rumble from the other side. Let's get Malevolent Rumble on the screen now that both players have cast it. This is a very powerful Modern Horizons card. 2 mana, look at the top 4, put a permanent in your hand, and then the rest go to the graveyard, and you also get an Eldrazi spawn out of it that taps or sacrifices for mana. Moscow here finds the Underworld Breach. It's very close to combo killing. We'll see if he can set it up for next turn.
Follows up the Rumble with a Hedge Maze. It's really contemplating this top card. I think I see another Tamio and another land in hand, so he's missing the Grinding Station. The top card was Second Breach, decides, I don't need that. It's the other half of the combo that I'm missing.
There's another 2-mana land here. John Custer can pop off, and there it is. If we go Sowing Mycospawn, we can do full kicker, destroying an opposing land and going to get a land of our own. Let's see if that's the play. Kaboom! Alright, buy Hedge Maze. We're going to go get probably another Eldrazi Temple, but there are plenty of utility lands to go grab. Something like Bojuka Bog is off in main deck, and that can eat the graveyard to make a small ball Underworld Breach a little bit worse.
Custer does have the bog if he wants it. Could find a
Whoa.
fetch land with the plan to get commercial district, but opts for that bog. Honestly, not going to do a whole lot to prevent a combo from Moscow. Moscow has another land in hand, has the breach. If he draws Grinding Station, this game will be over.
Okay, we're going to pop the bauble, digging deep. The Mox Opal is currently turned off, but all it takes is an attack with Tamio to turn it back on.
And then a land and the spawn gives Moscow access to 4 mana. He can start looping the Mox Opal with a breach and station, and making a mana each time, and eventually cast the Jace. But looks like he drew Lightning Bolt, and I'm not sure what his other draw was between draw step and the bauble trigger.
Okay.
Looks like another land.
I saw a blue-red land, might have been a Scalding Tarn that he played for turn. But that Lightning Bolt, it can kill this 3/3, but that's not really the kind of game or the kind of cards you want to draw in this matchup.
I suspect Moscow will take the hit from the Myco spawn, see if there's a Karn from Custer, and if there isn't, he might fire off the bolt on the 3/3 just to keep pressure off his life total and buy himself more time.
Yeah, and all that coupled with maybe transforming the Tamio as well to keep the Tamio healthy so he can tick it up. I think he drew Jace, so now I think he's insulated from graveyard hate.
So, transforming the Tamio further incentivizes Moscow to kill the Sowing Myco spawn, because now he keeps pressure off of the Planeswalker and can start taking up to an ultimate, which will certainly lead to an immediate combo. It always does.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever continued playing a game after ultimating Tamio. Usually people just concede.
Oh, I have. It's very fun.
Well, that's because no one wants to concede against you, Ross. You have that face. You have that face where if they start comboing, you start smiling or whatever. And then I'm never conceding. I'm making you do everything.
Fine. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
You're
Moscow
one of those
deploys the
sickos,
other
that's why you're
Tamio
smiling.
with a Steam Vents. So because the Tamio Planeswalker is plussed, when the Myco spawn attacks, it'll be shrunk to a 2/3, and then the Tamio creature can cleanly block it. So doesn't need to deploy the Lightning Bolt, can freely tap out for the Tamio creature. But this can be a big turn for Custer.
I see it.
Looks like is this Karn or another Myco spawn?
Look like Karn, the Great Creator, and that is going to be a problem for Moscow. He does have the Lightning Bolt, though.
Now, does Custer tick up and say kill Mox Opal, or does he tick down and get a Tormod script? This is always the dilemma for Karn players. He's deciding to tick up.
I told everyone not to bring their own dice out. I told them to use the dice on the table, and no one listens. And my man Hardesty is too involved. He's right next to him. He can't see it.
So now, with the Mox Opal, Jace, Lightning Bolt, Underworld Breach in hand from Moscow, really nothing going.
Yeah, I mean...
Can't even play... I guess could play the Jace, right? Because of the spawn.
Right. There are plenty of artifacts being shut down by the Karn, but the Eldrazi is not.
You would allow a free attack from the Myco spawn since the Tamio creature is already attacked, but a 2/3 isn't going to kill either Planeswalker, so that's not as big of a deal. So a Jace deployment makes sense here. Custer notably did not make a land drop on his last turn, so if you're worried about expensive cards like Emrakul or Worldbreaker, he would need to draw more mana in order to even cast them.
All right, so we're going to play Jace. Was it Wielder of Mysteries? This 4-mana Planeswalker allows you to draw cards, but more importantly, if you have no cards left in your deck, he allows you to win the game. This is normally the win condition that you would play after milling your whole deck with Grinding Station. Can we get the Jace on the screen? Jace Wielder of Mysteries. It's triple blue, which is sometimes hard to cast, but normally when you're comboing with this deck, you make plenty of blue mana thanks to the Moxen, recycling with the Grinding Station and such. Did we forget to tick up the Tamio?
Looks like he might have, which is rather awkward. It means the Myco spawn will attack as a 3/3. Could attack Tamio down to 1. Whereas if it was on 6 and you attacked it down to 4, you could still -3 with it.
All right, we're going to play another Malevolent Rumble. Finds World Breaker and some other junk. The Kozilek's Return going to go to the graveyard, and that is going to potentially be disastrous later if Moscow wants to get some more creatures in play.
Custer goes for the World Breaker, which is interesting because we know he doesn't have any more lands in hand. You'd think he would want to take more mana there and have threats to deploy, but I guess he really wants World Breaker to as a more impactful threat. And the spawn will allow him to cast the World Breaker next turn.
All right, so Custer going to look at the sideboard here before making a decision on the Karn. Might want to keep ticking it up to keep it protected. May want to go get something that insulates him from a combo.
Yeah, it doesn't have a super full Karn sideboard because he has 3 Stone Rain, 2 Dismember, and a Kozilek's Return, but he has some options here. You know, has the Tormod's Crypt, which is the typical card you see. Could get Liquimeta Coating to try to further stymie Moscow's mana. Could get Haywire Might, Soulless Jailer. Went with the Tormod's Crypt.
Okay, I think Moscow realizing that he forgot to tick up the Tamio now makes a frown, but we're going to pass it back and see what we can do.
Having drawn Talisman makes more sense for Custer to take the World Breaker off of the Malevolent Rumble.
Why is Karn at 3 instead of 4?
Yeah, that should be at 4 because it plus last turn and then -2.
All right, try to get that fixed.
Makes a pretty big difference with Bolt in
Makes
Moscow's
a huge
hand.
difference.
Interestingly, Moscow drew Preordained this turn. And if he Preordains and activates Jace, the Tamio will transform. And I don't know if he really wants that.
Okay, we're going to start with the Preordain, though. Moscow going to put them both on bottom quickly. Digging for one of those bounce spells, I'm sure.
Finds an Urza's Saga. And that is a pretty nice way to attack down a Karn, but it also is going to be exiled by World Breaker if Custer wants to next turn. And so Tamio attacks, Jace activates. Now this Tamio transforms. Planeswalker Uniqueness rule comes into effect. Moscow decides to keep the new one, immediately tick it up. So now there will be 2 -1/-0 triggers on Custer's next attack. Moscow did remember to plus the first Tamio this turn. Finally finds the grinding station, but Moscow now needs to find a way to answer this Karn.
Yeah, but once he finds it, I think the game just ends. That Tormod's Crypt seems like it's doing something, but it's really not.
Moscow could bolt end step and then untap and start his turn with Breach Bolt if he finds another red source. And from there,
The Tormod's Crypt does shut that down.
True. Yeah, there's the Tormod's Crypt to reckon with as well. Multiple pieces of hate. So Moscow in a tight spot here because we are entering the phase of the game where the Eldrazi deck starts casting really, really powerful cards.
Oh, yeah.
And if Custer ever casts Emrakul, the game usually ends on the spot.
All right, so there's 2 triggers from Tamio, so there's only going to be a 1-point attack at Tamio. It's going to go down to 3. Now with a sideboard full of the goods, Custer might want to minus, and he does. He -3 again. He keeps doing that.
So now the Karn is vulnerable to Lightning Bolt, but Custer finding a copy of the Stone Brain, and this can take all the breaches out of Moscow's deck.
Yeah, and that is the one you take. You just say Underworld Breach, and then the game becomes a different type of game after that. We're going to Lightning Bolt in response.
So take out the Karn.
Yep, I heard him say Underworld Breach. Or I didn't hear him, but I saw him.
2 grinding stations found for Moscow, so couldn't find it on the turn where it would have represented a lethal combo, but once the hate came down, then he finds it. A little punch to the gut there.
Yeah, early Karn the Great Creator. That is one way to really hammer this Breach deck. It uses so many artifacts to do the combo from the Moxen to the grinding station, and you're seeing how much work Karn did this game. It also found Tormod's Crypt for protection. It ate a Lightning Bolt. It ate a Clue or Moxen earlier. I'm not sure which. But
A Mox. But Moscow will get a card to replace the Underworld Breach taken from his hand, and he is absolutely going to need it.
All right, he needs to draw a card. We need to go stop. It's like a function of John's cards, and he needs to tell his opponent to draw a card.
Okay. Moscow draws his card from the Stone Brain, and everything's all set.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Moscow's way. Draws for turn.
And now, wonder how many cards are left in Moscow's deck. Because he has the Jace already in play, and he has 2 grinding stations in hand. He could do this manually.
Let's see it. Let's see the manual grinding station kill while there's no Karn on the table. Start with Emery. That's a mill 4.
And he still has 4 mana left over for the grinding stations. And has another Mox in hand. So each grinding station by itself represents a mill of 6. Because it'll enter, create a trigger to untap, and as long as you have the artifacts to sack, you can sack 2 and mill 3 each time. And then the Mox can represent another mill of 6. That's potentially 18.
Looks like we're also going to use Tamio's minus to get something back from the graveyard.
Malevolent Rumble. Because Rumble is green, the Tamio makes a mana of any color. And so this is effectively a free Rumble. You get a mana back from the Tamio, you spend 2 on the Rumble, and then you get a mana back from the spawn with the Rumble, and it also mills 4 more cards and potentially finds you another artifact.
I think Custer was thinking about using the Tormod's Crypt there to stop it, and I think he probably should have. Now the Underworld Breaches are gone, there's not too many things that utilize the graveyard here. And,
yeah, and that would have not only
countered the mana as well, right?
Yes, because it is all part of one ability. Yeah, Moscow is doing the math here. He's going to try to mill his deck manually and win with the Jace that's already in play.
Yeah,
so Rumble gets cast. He finds a Mox Amber. That's perfect. Now it's just a question of does he have enough artifacts to sacrifice? He has 2 clues and a Mox Opal. So he uses the spawn and the Mox Opal to cast the first station. Responds to the untap trigger by sacking clue. Now it's untapped. Now sack the Mox Opal.
Yeah, now every artifact untaps. It's cool the grinding station puts a trigger on the stack when it enters.
Yes.
You don't see it come up too often, but here it's just working.
Now play the other Mox Opal, untap grinding station. Float a mana off this Mox Opal. It's a blue. Sack it to grinding station, mill 3. And that is with the untap trigger on. Now the Mox Amber. Mill 3. Now you have 2 mana to play the other grinding station. And we have 3 total artifacts. You can mill 9 more cards.
Yeah. Cast grinding station. Untap the other grinding station. Trigger on the stack. We could even do more.
We just don't have enough artifacts to sack.
Just mill themselves. Yeah. And then plus the Jace. Wow. Game number 1 goes to Josh Moscow with the manual mill.
Yeah, this Karn, Tormod's Crypt, and Stonebrain on your breach is still not good enough.
Maybe regretting not using that Tormod's Crypt when you had the chance, huh?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, it effectively milled 7 cards, right? It's 4 off the Rumble and 3 off the Mox Amber. Mm-hmm. And that 7 cards was quite relevant.
Yeah, the mana also maybe came up, the Rumble finding something and maybe come up, but we'll just have to wait and see. As these players reach for their sideboard, we're going to talk about John Custer's sideboard plan here because he's playing Eldrazi with Karn the Great Creator. What kind of sideboard plans is he going to implement for this matchup against Underworld Breach?
So, Custer's sideboard is 2 Dismember, 3 Stone Rain, 3 the Stone Brain, 1 Kozilek's Return to supplement 3 in the main deck, and then a bunch of Karn targets, 1 Engineered Explosives, 1 Haywire Might, 1 Liquid Metal Coating, 1 Soulless Jailer, 1 Tormod's Crypt, and 1 Torpor Orb. I suspect that the Stone Brains will be coming in the deck. Those are a little bit slow to wish for off of Karn. Maybe he wants to leave 1 in, but at least 2 will be coming in. And then it's a question of what other things of the Karn targets do you want in the main. Generally, you want about 2 cards to wish for with Karn. Beyond that, it's somewhat excessive. You'd rather have them in the main deck and draw more hate cards naturally. So the Haywire Might is a option to come in. The Soulless Jailer can certainly come in. That's a piece of combo hate. And even the Engineered Explosives is an option. So those three could all come in. And I also think the Dismembers will come in. Destroying those early Emeries and Tamias can be very important.
Yep. On the other side of things, Josh Mosco's Underworld Breach deck. You have so much experience with this archetype. What is your plan against the Eldrazi decks?
So Moscow's sideboard is 1 Boseiju who endures, 4 Consign to Memory, 1 Dismember, 1 Dress Down, 1 Fire Spout, 2 Flame of Anor, 1 Grape Shot, 1 Haywire Might, 1 Nature's Claim, 1 Strict Serenade, and 1 Swan Song. The Consigned Memories are the most important cards here. Moscow has the full set. They are excellent in the matchup. They actually allow you to often transition into less of a combo deck and more of a Tamio control deck, where you land an early Tamio, you leverage the card advantage, you start countering all their stuff with Consigned Memory, you transfer the Tamio, you either, if you have more counters, you just start plussing up and work towards the ultimate. If you need more counters, you can rebuy them with the Tamio, and you just kind of run them out of threats that way. So Consigned Memory is excellent. The Boseiju should come in. The Flame of Anor should come in. The extra win condition and Grape Shot to help you play through the Graveyard Hate should come in. And I think the Haywire Might as well as the Strict Serenade. The one questionable card is really Nature's Claim. You'd think that this is sort of an artifacty deck. They have Karn. You want Claim. But they don't have that many
Artifacts don't
things.
work like that anymore, man.
Yeah, they don't have that many things you need to target with Nature's Claim.
All artifacts these days are 1s and 0s that get sacrificed or used as fodder. Destroying artifacts with like Ancient Grudge is like a lost memory.
Yeah, there are times when these decks have things like Trinisphere.
Yes.
And then you want access to more disenchants, but especially the way these Eldrazi builds are these days, I tend to not bring in Claim, but it's definitely an option. We'll see if Moscow feels differently.
Look, we saw Karn the Great Creator in play for multiple turns. It could have tutored for anything out of the sideboard, and nothing it got was like that scary. And when that's the case, like, you just don't really need the Nature's Claims anymore.
Right.
So
we are off here for game 2.
All right,
Custer
let's go.
leads with Forest Utopia Sprawl.
Usually naming red. Sometimes you need the second green mana, but we'll see if it comes up. Eternal Mishra's Bauble for Moscow. Here we go. Fetching away. Doesn't want that top card. Let's see if he remembers that Bauble trigger next upkeep.
And goes for a Breeding Pool, so has something to cast here. Likely a Tamio. Could be a Preordain.
Yeah, the popping of the Bauble signifies to me that probably doesn't have Emery in hand, right? There's a Mox and a Tamio. Anything else with that blue?
Oh.
He missed it. He missed it. He missed the Bauble trigger.
Oh, I think he remembered it in time. Okay, there it is.
Okay, all right. Custer starts with tapping this Utopia Sprawl land. Gonna play a Rumble, top 4.
Yeah, this is a great start for Custer as well. Ramp spell on turn 1, ramp spell on turn 2, and could find a 2-mana land to effectively have a 3rd ramp spell. Instead, opts for a Karn. Great choice. He's set up to cast it next turn.
Yep.
Just needs one more land.
Lands. Ooh, Stomping Ground. He's gonna play that untapped, so
It's another Sprawl, maybe? Or another Rumble. Another Rumble.
dig.
The spawn will get replaced. Now we see Talisman, and a couple lands. So not great hits off the second Rumble.
Yeah, maybe the worst Rumble I've ever seen. 4 mana sources, and none of them are good mana sources.
Yeah, if you had something like an Ugin's Labyrinth or an Eldrazi Temple, that would be a different story.
Looks like we're gonna put everything but the Wooded Foothills into the grave.
The one that could potentially find Commercial District and get a little bit more value. If Custer had 1 more mana in play, the Talisman would look more attractive because you could Talisman into the Karn. But
back to Moscow's turn 2. Going to lead by attacking with Tamio, making a clue token. And now Mox Opal is turned on.
And the real question is, does Moscow have any consigned memories?
Okay, we pop a clue to draw a card.
Looks like he has the 1 Pithing Needle, so he can preemptively Pithing Needle the Karn, and it'll just sit there as sort of an expensive Stony Silence.
Okay. Top 4 go to the graveyard from Emery's Mill ability, one of which is Underworld Breach. Any surgical extractions over there for Custer, or is it just those Stone Brains?
Stone Brain, he's got the Bajuka Bog he could tutor up with Sowing Mycospawn.
So Moscow chose not to deploy that Pithing Needle. I'm wondering if he maybe has a Spell Pierce or something similar over there to defend.
Could have. It's got to be either Consigned Memory or Strict Serenade. There has to be one. There's no, when you know about the Karn, there's no reason to not preempt it unless you already have a different answer.
Okay, Custer taps 4.
Yeah, did have an Eldrazi Temple in hand, but still going to go for the Karn. And yeah, there is consigned to memory as fast as possible from
Yeah.
Moscow.
Okay.
And from this point, the name of the game for Moscow is to transform this Tamio. He has everything set up to play that control game, but he needs to transform the Tamio, and I don't think he has a really great way of doing that. I guess not this turn. Next turn he can do it because he
If
can Emery back the Bauble.
Yes, you could also maybe just like find Preordain if he wants to main phase crack Clue, and he already did that once last turn. I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again. But yeah, getting the Bauble means that we can probably flip next turn, but it just depends on how he wants to sequence, hold up, defend.
Yeah. And now this turn, if he doesn't have another counterspell, he may needle on Karn anyway, just in case there's a second copy in Custer's hand.
Okay, we're counting mana here with Moscow, so I'm very curious what this is going to be.
Does he have something like Savine's Reclamation for the Underworld Breach?
Oh, wow. I wonder if we have Breach into kill, or maybe Breach into like mini baubles?
Doesn't have a strong setup for a non-deterministic breach kill. Normally you want to see Malevolent Rumble for that.
Yeah.
Though he does have 2 Mox Opals, so if he has Rumble Breach, he can go through a large portion of his deck.
Well, there's Breach, so we might not be killing right now, but we are certainly doing some dirty. Taps Mox, we're going to play an Emery out of the graveyard. So we can kind of do the Emery Mox pseudo non-deterministic kill and try to hit the grinding station really quickly.
I missed the second Emery in the graveyard. So yeah, set 2 Emery, 2 Mox Opal, and now just 2 Mox Amber. Either one will do it. So just needs to hit a grinding station here. Every blue mana he has can effectively mill 4 cards, and then once he runs out of other mana, he can start looping the Mox in.
All right, mill 4. Okay.
That's Rumble, Floodmaw, Emery, Mox Opal.
Okay, now we're going to play another Mox.
Playing this one with the Emery that was not summoning sick, so...
Playing Rumble now.
Yeah, now hits Rumble. This is generally a better card to execute the loop with.
Yeah, the cards go to hand. One of the cards goes to hand.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want them to go to hand, but if you find another 0-mana artifact, you'd rather it go to hand because it can save you cards in your graveyard. So here, it's all irrelevant lands and spells. So Moscow says, I don't want an extra land in my hand. I need all the cards in my graveyard to execute this loop. So now replays Mox Opal. That costs him 3 cards. And we'll use the Spawn and the Opal to recast Malevolent Rumble.
Okay. Top 4. So this feels like it's spinning the wheels, but we're basically crunching our graveyard by 1 or 2 cards every time we do one of these iterations.
Well, he finds a Grape Shot, and now we've got to do the Storm count.
Okay. All right, buddy. Well, every 3 cards in exile is 1 spell cast, so you can kind of divide by 3 on that.
Yeah, but one of the Moxen got Emried, so they're gonna replay this turn and figure out what the storm count is.
We need to go to the footage, go to the backup footage, figure it out.
But I don't think Moscow is gonna have enough because he doesn't have enough resources to double Grape Shot. He will effectively only have 1 mana after this Malevolent Rumble just from the spawn. So he's going to need to Mox 3 more times and then Grape Shot twice. That's 5 escapes. You need 15 other cards in his graveyard, and he's just not anywhere close to that at this point. So he would need to have enough Storm to kill with 1 Grape Shot, and he's pretty well short of that. Looks like the Storm count is 7. So players will keep track of that. And Moscow will likely continue looping Mox Opal and Malevolent Rumble and try to find one of his grinding stations. Now, there's 3 grinding stations in the main deck, but most players board down to 2 in almost every matchup because the games go long and it's just a weak card to draw naturally. So I would expect that there are 2 in the deck.
You want more copies of your combo stuff in game 1 when your opponents are less prepared, when their plans are more centered around doing their own thing.
So I think the grinding station has to come right here because Moscow is going to cast Malevolent Rumble, exiling 3 cards. He'll leave the Grape Shot and the Mox Opal. And from there, he'll have 7 cards in his graveyard. and 1 mana available. And that is enough to play Mox, play Grinding Station. And it looks like he did not hit. That's Preordained Saga, Bauble, and Consigned to Memory. So takes the Mishra's Bauble.
So we can play Mox and then something from hand?
The Bauble does represent another card in the graveyard, but it's still only 7, so he could sack Bauble and play Mox Opal, play Malevolent Rumble. And there's a Karn on top for Custer. It's also more spells, so the storm count is up to 10. Could just play Mox Grape Shot, but that would only be 12 damage. Moscow has seen so many cards in his deck.
Yeah, but I mean, you're kind of hoping for the best sometimes when you play a value breach, right? We're playing Emeries, playing Rumbles, but we didn't have quite a big enough graveyard, quite a big enough mana base to do it. We had a ton, and we milled 30 cards or whatever, so we got a little unlucky, I'd say, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is.
And we know Moscow has the Pithing Needle in hand, so he can sack the spawn to play that Pithing Needle because he knows there's a Karn on top for Custer, and try to, essentially just rebuild.
23 cards in the deck, I think.
Yeah, so we went through over half his deck looking for a 2-outer, just didn't find it.
This is all on the back of Underworld Breach. Let's get Underworld Breach on the screen so I can yell about it. So, 2 mana enchantment from Theros Beyond Death. Basically, it's time for all the big baddies to break out of the underworld. Unfortunately, it's not really the big baddies doing it, it's Mishra's Baubles. And it's 0 mana things that keep coming back because they don't have a clause to be exiled. And so, we see these chains.
So Moscow now going to fully exile the rest of his graveyard to bauble a couple more times. This should set up 3 bauble triggers on Custer's upkeep, and that will transform the Tamio.
Okay. This Underworld Breach also needs to go to the graveyard.
Yeah, but there's no graveyard to utilize with it, and it's going to be 2 turns before it can even rebuy a spell anyway. And I believe there's 2 Consigned to Memories in exile. Might be 3.
Do you mind going to get Moscow to pull that Breach off the table?
Yeah, Moscow going through that exile pile, making sure he's aware of what's left in his deck. Now we'll see what Custer can do. The Karn is Pithing Needled, but Custer is getting up to 7 mana here with that Wooded Foothills, so he can start casting things like Devourer of Destiny to exile the Tamio, or World Breaker, exile the Pithing Needle, and set up his Karn for next turn. And there's always the looming threat of Emrakul. With those 2 Malevolent Rumbles, you have to assume Custer has a bunch of different types in his graveyard, though a lot of them hit lands. There's definitely Talisman in the graveyard for Artifact. There's definitely land. There's definitely Sorcery from Rumble. So at least 3 types in Custer's graveyard, which we can't quite see right now.
Alright, Custer gets a Forest off the Wooded Foothills. 7 mana here. See what he wants to deploy. We know about the Karn from the top of the deck. It is locked down with Needle, but it does shut down the artifacts on the other side. And this is...
Looks like a Sowing Myco spawn kicked.
I agree.
So we'll exile one of Moscow's lands. Opts for the Breeding Pool. Now you get another land of your own. Goes for Eldrazi Temple. That's a sign that he's trying to get to Emrakul.
I agree.
Because the Bog had some value here. There's not a big graveyard, but that Mishra's Bauble is very good with the Emery.
Alright, so Eldrazi Temple, nothing to do with it. Gonna pass back. Moscow got to be breathing a sigh of relief. That could have been a much worse turn for him. Gonna plus on the Tamio to start.
Looks like he found another Malevolent Rumble. Try to find another Breach here. It's Preordained, Misty, Urza Saga, and Sink into Stupor. Opts for the Saga.
Alright, Saga gonna come in. Counter on it. Now what? Gonna use Emery, bring back a Mishra's Bauble. Top card is, looks like Utopia Sprawl. We'll draw one on the upkeep.
I see a Tamio in hand from Moscow. So you can deploy that one as a creature. And I see a Sink into Stupor.
And he's going to play that Mox just so he can hold up the Sink into Stupor. And we're going to go back to Custer. Okay.
Yeah, so now Moscow's in this kind of Tamio control role, but he really wants to find a consigned memory instead of Sink into Stupor. Much better to be able to counter the triggered abilities from these Eldrazi as well as the spell itself.
Custer here counts the graveyard. Not sure how close he is to Emrakul. It's 13 with some reduction. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Looks like 10 mana from play. So if his graveyard has 3 types, we know there's
Emrakul mana.
Yeah.
Does he have another untapped fetchable with this Wooded Foothills? Yeah, there's...
Should be another Stomping Ground at least.
There's 3 forests in the deck, but I don't know how many of the fetchables are in the graveyard from those rumbles, because there were a few lands in there.
Okay.
He has 2 Stomping Ground, 3 forest, 1 commercial district, and 1 Overgrown Tomb as fetchable lands. Could also have just a 4th type. We just can't see his graveyard since it's in a pile and not fanned out.
Mm-hmm. The only cards I know about over there are Rumble, Wood of Foothills, and Karn. Here's a Karn the Great Creator from Custer. Can't be used.
Yeah, but it does shut off the Mox Opal, so no Sink into Stupor for Moscow, unless he floats a mana. Okay, there's Strict Serenade. I believe it is that counter spell. So Custer going to get a 2/2 bird.
Let me get that bird. All right, Strict Serenade on screen. This is a callback to Swan Song. 1 blue mana, counters 3 different card types, and gives your opponent a 2/2 bird, 2/2 flyer. These have become staples in Underworld Breach, not only for things like the mirror, but for protecting against various planeswalkers and whatnot.
Just the most efficient counter spells possible, and you often don't care about the 2/2 bird you give up.
Right. Looks like we fetched funky looking Stomping Ground, be my guess.
It might be the Overgrown Tomb.
All right, I'll allow it.
And then
Utopia
Sprawl Forest, so a lot of mana here for Custer. Not sure if he has the Emrakul in hand, but Moscow has to be worried about it.
Okay, back to Moscow. Saga's going to go to Chapter 2.
He's going to sack a clue on the end step. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Moscow pretty firmly in the driver's seat, but we know this Eldrazi deck can pop off at a moment's notice.
If Moscow can find a consigned memory, this Saga should take it down, because the consign can get rebought with Tamio several times over.
Yeah.
And Custer is light on spells as it is. He has 1 card left in hand, so if Moscow is able to counter Custer's next 1, 2, 3 threats even, the Saga will have enough time to win the game.
Mm-hmm. We did see him do a manual kill in game number 1 with that grinding station, milling himself out and winning with Jace. Looks like we might be trying to do something very similar here. Here's Malevolent Rumble.
Moscow drew grinding station, so now he's just going to hard dig for an Underworld Breach. So rebuys Malevolent Rumble with Tamio like he did last game. That makes a mana of any color. And he has very few cards left in his library, so there's a breach. That should do it. He uses the spawn and the Stomping Ground to cast Breach. You do have to be wary of Kozilek's command here, since Custer can cast it for X equals 3. Could potentially exile all the win conditions. Oh, was there no grinding station, or are we just manually going with Rumble again? Thought I saw grinding station in hand for Moscow.
I did too, but maybe he doesn't want to play it just yet.
Maybe he wants to get the Jace in hand so he can play around a Kozilek's command.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening right now.
And he can also get a consigned memory in his graveyard, and that will allow him to stop Kozilek's command via Underworld Breach. So I think this is just Moscow being careful to try to play around the best thing Custer could have, or the only thing Moscow really cares about.
Alright, we're going to sack that spawn, make it colorless. Probably play this grinding station here, and if Custer doesn't have anything, this could be game.
It's definitely game if Custer doesn't have anything.
Okay.
I also suspect that Misty Rainforest doesn't have a land to search for. Otherwise, Moscow probably would have done that by now.
4 cards left in deck.
4 cards, and how many of them are consigned to memory? Did we exile all of them?
3 cards milled.
There's a consign. So that should mean Moscow can easily play around Kozilek's command. Now it's just a question of mana generation. So Moscow doesn't have any mana in pool. If the Misty doesn't have anything to fetch, that's not a mana source. There's Mox Opal in play, so he really has access to 1 mana. Emery could recast a Mox as well. That's 2 mana. So he'll need 2 more escapes.
Yeah, but I think he's got plenty of cards in graveyard, so it's just tap those for 2, grind you, sack, right? Play it again.
He's just not grinding anything, doesn't matter. So now floating 2 mana with Mox Amber, Mox Opal, and he'll just loop Mox Opal a couple times with Underworld Breach to generate 1 extra each time.
Blue mana token. Now, Mox from the graveyard. Exiling 3 randos. Mox from the graveyard, exiling 3 randos. Moscow's playing pretty clean, I gotta say.
3 blue.
Sometimes that can be overwhelming.
4 blue. Now he's gonna let all the triggers resolve and then just mill out the last few cards of his deck when he will immediately gain priority. Yeah, okay. Getting a 5th blue for consigned to memory.
Alright, now mill the last card is the Jace. Alright, and so now you can cast the Jace, and there's not a way to exile it. John Custer packs it in. Moscow wins a clean 2-0 with a somewhat unconventional turn, but got there nonetheless.
You see the Emrakul was the last card in hand for Custer. It just needed 1 more turn to be able to cast it, but Moscow did not give it to him.